The Lotus Sutra, Chapter 11, The Emergence of the Treasure Tower. At that time, in the Buddha's presence, there was a tower adorned with the 7 treasures, 500 yohanas in height and 250 yohanas in width and depth, that rose up out of the earth and stood suspended in the air. Various kinds of precious objects adorned it. It had 5,000 railings, 10,000 rooms, and numberless streamers and banners decorated it. Festoons of jewels hung down, and 10,000 million jeweled bells were suspended from it. All 4 sides emitted a fragrance of tamalapatra and sandalwood that pervaded the whole world. Its banners and canopies were made of the 7 treasures, namely gold, silver, lapis lazuli, seashell agate, pearl, and carnelian, and it was so high it reached the heavenly palaces of the 4 heavenly kings. The gods of the Triastrimsha heaven rained down heavenly mandarava flowers as an offering to the treasure tower, and the other heavenly beings and the dragons, yakshas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnaras, mahoragas, human and non-human beings, an assembly of thousands of 10,000s, millions, offered all kinds of flowers, incense, necklaces, streamers, canopies, and music as alms to the treasure tower, paying it reverence, honor, and praise. At that time, a loud voice issued from the treasure tower, speaking words of praise. Excellent, excellent Shakyamuni, world-honored one, that you can take the great wisdom of equality, a law to instruct the bodhisattvas, guarded and kept in mind by the Buddhas, the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, and preach it for the sake of the great assembly. It is as you say, Shakyamuni, world-honored one, all that you have expounded is the truth. At that time, the 4 kinds of believers saw the great treasure tower suspended in the air, and they heard the voice that issued from the tower. All experienced the joy of the law, marveling at this thing that had never been known before. They rose from their seats, pressed their palms together in reverence, and then retired to one side. At that time there was a bodhisattva and mahasattva named Great Joy of Preaching, who understood the doubts that were in the minds of the heavenly and human beings, asuras and other beings of all the world. He said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, for what reason has this treasure tower risen up out of the earth? And why does this tower issue from its midst? And why does this voice issue from its midst?" At that time, the Buddha said, "Bodhisattva, Great Joy of Preaching, in the treasure tower is the complete body of a thus come one. Long ago, in immeasurable 1,000, 10,000 million asamkayas of worlds to the east, in a land called Treasure Purity, there was a Buddha named Many Treasures. When this Buddha was originally carrying out the Bodhisattva way, he made a great vow, saying, 'If after I have become a Buddha and entered extinction, in the lands of the 10 directions there is any place where the Lotus Sutra is preached, then my funerary tower, in order that I may listen to this sutra, will come forth and appear in that spot to testify to the sutra and praise its excellence.' When that Buddha had finished carrying out the Buddha way and was on the point of passing into extinction, in the midst of the great assembly of heavenly and human beings, he said to the monks, 'After I have passed into extinction, if there are those who wish to offer alms to my complete body, then they should erect a great tower. That Buddha, through his transcendental powers and the power of his vow, ensures that throughout the worlds in the 10 directions, no matter in what place, if there are those who preach the Lotus Sutra, this treasure tower will in all cases come forth and appear in their presence, and his complete body will be in the tower, speaking words of praise and saying, "Excellent, excellent. Great Joy of Preaching, now this tower of the thus come one Many Treasures, because it heard the preaching of the Lotus Sutra, has come forth out of the ground and speaks words of praise, saying, "Excellent, excellent." At this time, Bodhisattva, great joy of preaching, knowing the supernatural powers of the thus come one, spoke to the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, we wish to see the body of this Buddha." The Buddha said to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, great joy of preaching, "This many treasures Buddha has taken a profound vow, saying, when my treasure tower, in order to listen to the Lotus Sutra, comes forth into the presence of one of the Buddhas, if there should be those who wish me to show my body to the four kinds of believers, then let the various Buddhas who are emanations of that Buddha and who are preaching the law in the worlds in the 10 directions, all return and gather around that Buddha in a single spot. Only when that has been done will my body become visible." Great joy of preaching. I will now gather together the various Buddhas that are emanations of my body, that are preaching the law in the worlds of the 10 directions. Great joy of preaching said to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I and the others also wish to see these Buddhas that are emanations of the world-honored one, and to make obeisance to them and offer alms." At that time, the Buddha emitted a ray of light from the tuft of white hair between his eyebrows, immediately making visible the Buddhas in the eastern region in lands as numerous as 510,000 million Nayutas of Ganges sands. The earth in all these lands was made of crystal, and the lands were adorned with jeweled trees and jeweled robes. Countless thousands, 10,000s, millions of bodhisattvas filled them, and everywhere were hung jeweled curtains with jeweled nets covering them over. The Buddhas in these lands preached the various doctrines of the law with great and wonderful voices, and one could see immeasurable thousands, 10,000s, millions of bodhisattvas filling all these lands and preaching the law for the assembly. In the southern, western, and northern regions as well, and in the 4 intermediate quarters, and up and down wherever the beam from the tuft of white hair, a characteristic feature of the Buddha, shone, the same was true. At that time the Buddhas of the 10 directions each spoke to his multitude of bodhisattvas, saying, "Good men, now I must go to the Saha world, to the place where Shakyamuni Buddha is, and offer alms to the treasure tower of many treasures thus come ones." The Saha world thereupon immediately changed into a place of cleanness and purity. The ground was made of lapis lazuli, jeweled trees adorned it, and ropes of gold marked off the 8 highways. There were no villages, towns, or cities, great seas or rivers, mountains, streams, or forests. Great jeweled incense was burning there, and mandarava flowers covered the ground all over. Jeweled nets and curtains were spread above, hung with jeweled bells, and the members of this assembly alone were gathered there, all other heavenly and human beings having been moved to another region. At that time the Buddhas, each with a great bodhisattva to act as his attendant, arrived in the Saha world and proceeded to a position beneath one of the jeweled trees. Each of these jeweled trees was 500 yohanas high, and adorned with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in due proportion. Under all the jeweled trees were lion seats 5 yohanas in height, and these too were decorated with large jewels. At that time, each of the Buddhas took one of these seats, seating himself in cross-legged position. In this way the seats were filled throughout the 1,000,000,000-fold world. But there was no end even to the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha arriving from merely one direction. At that time, Shakyamuni Buddha, wishing to provide space for all the Buddhas that were emanations of his body, in addition transformed 210,000 million Nayutas of land in each of the 8 directions, making them all clean and pure and without hells, hungry spirits, beasts, or asuras. He also moved all their heavenly and human beings to another region. The ground in these lands that he had transformed was also made of lapis lazuli. Jeweled trees adorned them, each tree 500 yohanas high, and adorned with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in due proportion. There were jeweled lion seats under all the trees, 500 yohanas high, 5 yohanas in height, and ornamented with various kinds of treasure. These lands too were without great seas or rivers, or any kingly ranges of mountains such as the Mukalinda Mountains, Maha Mukalinda Mountains, Iron Encircling Mountains, Great Iron Encircling Mountains, or Mount Sumeru. The whole area comprised a single Buddha land, a jeweled region level and smooth. Curtains crisscrossed with festoons of jewels were spread everywhere. Banners and canopies hung down. Great jeweled incense burned, and heavenly jeweled flowers covered the ground all around. Shakyamuni Buddha, in order to provide seats for all the Buddhas that were arriving, once more transformed 210,000 million nayutas of lands in each of the 8 directions, making them all clean and pure and without hells, hungry spirits, beasts, or asuras. He also moved all the heavenly and human beings to another region. The ground in these lands that he had transformed was likewise made of lapis lazuli. Jeweled trees adorned the lands, each tree 500 yohanas in height, and adorned with branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit in due proportion. There were jeweled lion seats under all the trees, 5 yohanas in height, and ornamented with great jewels. These lands too were without great seas or rivers, or any kingly ranges such as the Mukalinda Mountains, Maha Mukalinda Mountains, Iron Encircling Mountains, Great Iron Encircling Mountains, or Mount Sumeru. The whole area comprising a single Buddha land, a jeweled region level and smooth. Curtains crisscrossed with festoons of jewels were spread everywhere. Banners and canopies hung down. Great jeweled incense burned, and heavenly jeweled flowers covered the ground all around. At that time, the emanations of Shakyamuni Buddha from the eastern region, Buddhas in lands equal in number to hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of Ganges sands, each preaching the law, had assembled there, and bit by bit, the Buddhas from the 10 directions all came and assembled in this way, and were seated in the 8 directions. At this time, each of the directions was filled with Buddhas, thus come ones, in 410,000 million nayutas of lands. At this time, the Buddhas, each seated on a lion seat under one of the jeweled trees, all dispatched their attendants to go and greet Shakyamuni Buddha. Each Buddha presented his attendant with a handful of jeweled flowers and said, "Good man, you must go to Mount Gridhrakuta, to the place where Shakyamuni Buddha is, and speak to him as I instruct you. Say, are your illnesses few? Are your worries few? In spirit and vigor are you well and happy? And are the bodhisattvas and voice hearers all well and happy? Then take these jeweled flowers and scatter them over the Buddha as an offering, and say, the Buddha so-and-so would like to participate in the opening of this treasure tower." All the Buddhas dispatched their attendants to speak in this manner. At that time Shakyamuni Buddha saw the Buddhas that were his emanations, all assembled, each sitting on a lion seat, and heard all these Buddhas say that they wished to participate in the opening of the treasure tower. Immediately he rose from his seat and stationed himself in midair. All the 4 kinds of believers likewise stood up, pressed their palms together, and gazed at the Buddha with a single mind. Shakyamuni Buddha, with the fingers of his right hand, then opened the door of the Tower of 7 Treasures. A loud sound issued from it, like the sound of a lock and crossbar being removed from a great city gate. And at once all the members of the assembly caught sight of many treasures thus come one, seated on a lion seat inside the treasure tower, his body whole and unimpaired, sitting as though engaged in meditation. And they heard him say, "Excellent, excellent Shakyamuni Buddha, you have preached this Lotus Sutra in a spirited manner. I have come here in order that I may hear this sutra." At that time, the 4 kinds of believers, observing this Buddha who had passed into extinction immeasurable thousands, 10,000s, millions of kalpas in the past, speaking in this way, marveled at what they had never known before, and took measure of the masses of heavenly jeweled flowers, and scattered them over Many Treasures Buddha and Shakyamuni Buddha. At that time, Many Treasures Buddha offered half of his seat in the treasure tower to Shakyamuni Buddha, saying, "Shakyamuni Buddha, sit here." Shakyamuni Buddha at once entered the tower and took half of the seat, seating himself in cross-legged position. At that time, the members of the great assembly, seeing the two thus come ones seated cross-legged on the lion's seat in the tower of 7 treasures, all thought to themselves, "These Buddhas are seated high up and far away. If only the thus come ones would employ their transcendental powers to enable all of us to join them there in the air." Immediately Shakyamuni Buddha used his transcendental powers to lift all the members of the great assembly up into the air, and in a loud voice he addressed all the 4 kinds of believers, saying, "Who is capable of broadly preaching the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law in this Saha world? Now is the time to do so, for before long the thus come one will enter nirvana." The Buddha wishes to entrust this Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law to someone so that it may be preserved. That at that time the world-honored one, wishing to state his meaning once more, spoke in verse form, saying, This holy Lord, this world-honored one, though he passed into extinction long ago, still seats himself in the treasure tower, coming here for the sake of the law. You people, why then do you not also strive for the sake of the law? This Buddha passed into extinction an endless number of kalpas ago, but in many places he comes to listen to the law, because such opportunities are hard to encounter. This Buddha originally made a vow, saying, After I have passed into extinction, wherever I may go, in whatever place, my constant aim will be to hear the law. In addition, these emanations of my body, Buddhas in immeasurable numbers, like Ganges sands, have come desiring to hear the law, and so they may see many treasures thus come one, who has passed into extinction. Each has abandoned his wonderful land, as well as his host of disciples. The heavenly and human beings, dragons and spirits, and all the offerings they give him, and has come to this place on purpose to make certain the law will long endure. In order to seat these Buddhas, I have employed transcendental powers, moving immeasurable multitudes, causing lands to be clean and pure, leading each of these Buddhas to the foot of a jeweled tree, adorned as lotus blossoms adorn a clear, cool pond. Beneath these jeweled trees are lion seats, and the Buddhas seat themselves on them, adorning them with their brilliance, like a huge torch burning in the darkness of the night. A wonderful incense exudes from their bodies, pervading the lands of the 10 directions. Living beings are wrapped in the aroma, unable to restrain their joy, as though a great wind were tossing the branches of a small tree. Through this expedient means they make certain that the law will long endure. So I say to the great assembly, after I have passed into extinction, who can guard and uphold, read and recite this sutra? Now in the presence of the Buddha, let him come forward and speak his vow. This many treasures Buddha, though he passed into extinction long ago, because of his great vow, roars the lion roar. Many treasures thus come one, I myself and these emanation Buddhas who have gathered here, surely know this is our aim. You sons of the Buddha, who can guard the law? Let him make a great vow to ensure that it will long endure. He who is capable of guarding the law of this sutra will thereby have offered alms to me and to many treasures. This many treasures Buddha, dwelling in his treasure tower, journeys constantly throughout the 10 directions for the sake of this sutra. One who guards this sutra will also have offered alms to the emanation Buddhas who have come here, adorning and making brilliant all the various worlds. If one preaches this sutra, he will be able to see the many treasures thus come one, and these emanation Buddhas. All you good men, each of you must consider carefully. This is a difficult matter. It is proper you should make a great vow. The other sutras number as many as Ganges sands, but though you expound those sutras, that is not worth regarding as difficult. If you were to seize Mount Sumeru and fling it far off to the measureless Buddha lands, that too would not be difficult. If you used the toe of your foot to move the 1,000,000,000-fold world, booting it far away to other lands, that too would not be difficult. If you stood in the summit of being heaven, and for the sake of the assembly preached countless other sutras, that too would not be difficult. But if after the Buddha has entered extinction, In the time of evil, you can preach this sutra. That will be difficult indeed. If there were a person who took the empty sky in his hand and walked all around with it, that would not be difficult. But if after I have passed into extinction, one can write out and embrace this sutra and cause others to write it out, that will be difficult indeed. If one took the great earth, placed it on his toenail, and ascended with it to the Brahma heaven, that would not be difficult. But if after the Buddha has passed into extinction, in the time of evil, one can even for a little while read this sutra, that will be difficult indeed. If when the fire comes at the end of the kalpa, one can load dry grass on his back and enter the fire without being burned, that would not be difficult. But after I have passed into extinction, if one can embrace this sutra and expound it to even one person, that will be difficult indeed. If one were to embrace this storehouse of 84,000 doctrines, the 12 divisions of the sutras, and expound it to others, causing listeners to acquire these 6 transcendental powers, though one could do that, that would not be difficult. But after I have entered extinction, if one can listen to and accept this sutra and ask about its meaning, that will be difficult indeed. If a person expounds the law, allowing thousands, 10,000s, millions, immeasurable numbers of living beings equal to Ganges sands to become arhats, endowed with these 6 transcendental powers, though one might confer such benefits, that would not be difficult. But after I have entered extinction, if one can honor and embrace a sutra such as this one, that will be difficult indeed. For the sake of the Buddha way, in immeasurable numbers of lands from the beginning until now, I have widely preached many sutras, and among them this sutra is foremost. If one can uphold this, he will be upholding the Buddha's body. All you good men, after I have entered extinction, who can accept and uphold, read and recite this sutra? Now in the presence of the Buddha, let him come forward and speak his vow. This sutra is hard to uphold. If one can uphold it, even for a short while, I will surely rejoice. And so will the other Buddhas. A person who can do this wins the admiration of the Buddhas. This is what is meant by valor. This is what is meant by diligence. This is what is called observing the precepts and practicing dutta. This way one will quickly attain the unsurpassed Buddha way. And if in future existences one can read and uphold this sutra, he will be a true son of the Buddha, dwelling in a land spotless and good. If after the Buddha has passed into extinction, one can understand the meaning of this sutra, he will be the eyes of the world. For heavenly and human beings, if in that fearful age one can preach this sutra for even a moment, he will deserve to receive alms from all heavenly and human beings.